the Great British Manufacturing Podcast, brought to you by MTD, MFG and Jefferson.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. Coming up on this week's show, with news from Magellan Aerospace, Britishvolt and defence behemoth BAE Systems, plus much more positive UK manufacturing news. We also have a very special guest on the show, the CEO of Make UK, Stephen Phipson CBE, and he's going to be telling us all about the super deduction, Make UK, plus many more topics. Before we get started, if you feel our podcast is offering the industry value, then help us spread the word by sharing the podcast on LinkedIn and your other social media platforms. It would really mean the world to us. Also, if you want to be a guest on the show, please reach out to us at podcast@mtdmfg.com. Joining me today, as always, is Stuart Whitehead. Stuart, let's get straight on with it. The UK manufacturing PMI, it surged to 58.8 last month. Great start to the month.
Absolutely, Joe. The pubs are open, sun is shining, PMI at 58.9, highest reading in more than a decade. Business optimism is at a 7-year high. Manufacturers are hiring staff at the fastest rate since 2014. So great start to the month.
Yeah, we see a lot of supposed bad news on social media. It's fair to say there's probably more good than bad at the moment.
No, absolutely, and hopefully we're going to cover a few of those this morning, Joe.
For sure. So Moog Aviation in Gloucestershire. This is a site I used to visit many moons ago, but obviously a new £40 million site being put into Moog in Gloucestershire. Yeah,
I mean, it's been a challenging time for the aerospace sector, but we are going to cover, a couple of companies in that area today. So Moog, £40 million factory, they've broken ground on this new facility in Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire. New York headquartered firm describes the investment as an integral part of its commitment to manufacturing in the UK. So great for the Southwest and great for the UK. Sure.
Dyson as well. There's a lot of jobs being bought, in the UK, a lot of new jobs.
Yeah, this is very recent. Announced plans to create 200 jobs in the UK as a part of a £2.75 billion global investment programme and build on its commitment to deepen research into advanced robotics and AI. The new recruits will be based at Dyson's Innovation Campus in Wiltshire, which is one of the largest R&D hubs in Britain.
Yep. Magellan Aerospace expanding its Wrexham site, creating 120 jobs. That's another facility I used to visit many moons ago, and I know they make some huge components for the aerospace industry.
Yeah, they certainly do. You've certainly been around as well, Joe. So the components manufacturer, Tier 1 supplier to both Airbus and Boeing, is set to build a new assembly and a distribution facility at its Wrexham site in North Wales, as you say. And a Canadian-owned firm expects a multi-million-pound investment to create 120 new jobs. So good news for North Wales. And hopefully, Airbus have had to let a couple of people go in that region. So hopefully, those jobs will be very welcome.
Well, let's take a brief pause for the news from this week and bring in our podcast guest. On this week's show, we've got a very special guest who is no other than CEO of Make UK, Stephen Phipson CBE. Stephen has been the Chief Executive Officer of Make UK since joining in 2017, and before that held various roles for UK government and large players from within the industry. So Stephen, a very warm welcome to the podcast. Can you just give us a brief background of who you are?
Yeah, sure. And it's very good to be here, and thanks for the time. So, yep, I've been, as you say, Chief Exec of Make UK since 2017. Before that, I was the Head of Defence and Security Exports for the government for about 3.5 years, 4 years, and then spent a little bit of time before that in the Home Office, in the Office of Security and Counter-Terrorism, helping with industry engagement on overseas programs. And that was a really interesting part of my career. But before that, I'm an engineer by background, and I led a couple of the divisions in Smiths Group PLC of FTSE 100 in manufacturing. Before that, worked with companies like Boeing Space and Defence, and did a traditional engineering apprenticeship. So most of my career has been in manufacturing, and it's the area that I'm most passionate about.
Morning, Stephen. Fascinating to hear your background, and especially that you came through the apprenticeship route, which we advocate for everybody, or most people. And can you also give for the audience a brief overview of Make UK, its membership, its remit, etc., if you wouldn't mind?
Sure. So, Make UK. So it used to be known as the Engineering Employers Federation. In fact, next month, or later this month, it's 125 years old. So it's not only one of the largest, but one of the oldest membership organisations in the UK and for industry. Currently, we're representing around 22,000 manufacturing companies up and down the country, which together combined employ about 1 million people out of the 2.7 million people employed in the sector. So we get a really good cross section of all the subsectors and all the issues around manufacturing. And as well as doing the representation and support work for the sector, we also actually provide a range of services for manufacturers as well. But one of the most important ones we do is apprentice training. We have one of the largest apprentice training centres in the country up in Birmingham, where we have a community of nearly 1,500 engineering apprenticeships doing robotics and mechatronics and all the sort of latest apprentice vocational skills that we need to deliver. And we also do a lot of training. We have a training group that does a lot of training for things like health and safety with many manufacturers. I think in normal times, in 2019, we delivered about 20,000 courses to manufacturers up and down the country. And we also support them on things like HR legal services and providing places for them to meet. We've got a venues business as well, where we use some of our facilities for conferencing for manufacturers. So a really integrated service offering, as well as doing all the representation work at the highest levels of government. So for me, a fascinating organisation, and one that's been around a long time, which I think is really good. So we understand the manufacturing sector very well.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating for me, for just the sheer, the diverseness of your business. You must talk to somebody that makes cars, and then somebody that makes watches, and then an SME just starting up, I guess.
Yeah, we do. We have the whole range, food and drink manufacturers through to, as you say, the big car companies are all part of it, aerospace, you name a sector, and we have that in membership, and that gives us a really good broad view of the challenges and the opportunities that the sector has. And there are common themes. That's the point. I mean, and we can get onto some of those, but common themes would be things like skills, for example, the digitization program that's going on as part of I4, the fourth industrial revolution. And these apply to all companies up and down the country and across all sectors. So we're very, very happy to be able to advise and to push on those subjects with those companies. That's an important part of the job.
Sure. And in last week's podcast, we talked about the super deduction. As a business, MTD and Jefferson, we endorse it. We think it's fantastic. It needed to happen, and it has happened, so that's good. But I know you've reinforced it at Make UK. You've done a survey. Well,
we have, and the survey was really around what people's reactions were to some of these interventions, and the super deduction boost was one of them. I mean, anything that's going to stimulate investment is a positive thing, to be very clear. We saw in the last 12 months around a 30% reduction in investment in manufacturing companies. A lot of that due to the pandemic and the uncertainty around what the new trading arrangements with the EU are going to be like, and things of that taken together have sort of, dented people's confidence. We are starting to see confidence come back. And we were very pleased to see that the Treasury and the Chancellor recognised an opportunity to try to encourage and stimulate actual investment more. So yes, of course, welcomed it. I mean, it could have been a bit longer. 2 years is quite a short period. And of course, in some cases, if you look, some of the larger companies tend to lease a lot of their equipment, so not so relevant for them. But for that community of mid-size and SMEs in manufacturing, it's been very well received, and we hope to see people bringing forward their investment plans to try and get us back into that investment mode to reverse the trend we've seen for the last 12 months.
Yeah, no, exactly that. No, exactly. Anything that stimulates, exactly that. Yeah. Investment in plant, investment in people, which they almost come hand in hand. You need more plants, quite often you need more people.
Yeah, you do. Particularly now we're looking at a whole raft of new opportunities. And, in that context, the investment part of this is going to be critical. And in the slowdown we did see last year will have an impact, because it takes time to invest in plant and machinery. Also, investment in manufacturing is a long-term sport. People talk about 10-year cycles for investment in our sector. So the quicker we can get everyone back investing again with confidence, and it's good to see the confidence increasing over the last couple of months, then we're going to be in much better shape for the future.
And just a couple of questions on the survey, Stephen, if I may. I know one of the points you made was, the the partnership between government, industry, and the UK's world-class science base is absolutely key to this. Is that, do you feel as though those kind of partnerships, I know we've seen the capital centres and, AMRC and so forth, and these, these incubators, is that absolutely at the epicenter of this to make a difference over a long period? And also, I know that I think it was is also mentioned that historically the UK's investment performance has been below par. So do you feel as though this will have a massive impact on that, or is this really the start of a long journey really to remedy that?
Well, I think the answer is it's the start of a long journey. Most things in manufacturing are fairly long journeys, I would say.
Yeah.
But I would say the initiatives like the Catapult networks have been incredibly successful and very beneficial to thousands of businesses. When we see what's happened with the interventions that the high value manufacturing Catapult have made, the MTC with additive manufacturing processes. I mean, we are certainly leading in Europe now with those kinds of interventions, and amongst the best in the world at some of those technologies now, and which is great for our manufacturing base, because that's where government intervention can really accelerate a lot of these changes to new technology, and particularly important for digitization. This is one thing where we are encouraging more and more of the smaller companies to get on that journey of taking advantage of digitization in their business, because it has such a big effect on productivity and competitiveness going forwards. So initiatives like Made Smarter, vitally important to the sector, and encouraged to see the government support for that. Of course, we're always asking for more support so we can roll that out to more companies, but absolutely vital to keep us ahead of the curve and keep us competitive in a global market, which of course is even more important now than ever.
And just following on from that, thanks for that, for those answers and that clarification. So in terms of moving forward, this year, what kind of support and, further strategies would you like to see from the government to support the sector?
So always, number one, it doesn't matter what we're surveying on in terms of a manufacturing sector, but always number one issue is skills. Skills is always the concern of most companies. You can't operate manufacturing sites without the right level of skills. And that's both a combination of, university graduate level skills, but also vocational skills, absolutely vital. It doesn't matter how clever we are. We still need people to run the CNC machines and the robots on the shop floor. Really important to do that. And at the moment, we've got, I would say, a patchwork of different initiatives on skills from government. Sometimes it's quite complicated to navigate, particularly for smaller companies. All kinds of local initiatives and national initiatives. The apprentice levy scheme has not operated as well as it could do over the last few years. And so we've been working quite hard with DfE, and they are receptive to the ideas, but we do need to see progress on trying to have a real proper national approach to this vocational skills requirement. And also the other point to bear in mind is that we have a lot of, as well as having an aging workforce in manufacturing, which is concerning people, we need to attract more youngsters into the sector, absolutely vital. And we need to change some of the skill sets. So we need to have many more people coming into the sector who's got digital skills and analytic skills to be able to take advantage of the digital revolution that's going on. So skills is always up there as well as number one issue, I would say. And the other thing that we're getting increasing interest on is exports. A lot of companies interested in exploring new markets. We've one of the interesting problems of having some now challenges around the traditional market of the EU in many respects is that many of those companies are saying, well, what other areas of the world can we actually address now? Where can we look to export a lot of our capability? So it'll be a lot of work in terms of exports and some of those new trade deals and taking advantage of that. And then, of course, I would say the other point would be net zero and all the net zero technologies. This sort of falls into two halves. One is many companies thinking about how to improve their own operations, to how they can do that, make them more efficient and contribute to net zero. But not only that, we've got the development of new technologies, such as hydrogen technology, such as carbon capture usage and storage, or electric vehicle supply chain, where we've got to transition a lot of companies that were making internal combustion engines to making components for electric vehicles. Really big opportunities for manufacturers to really scale up into the latest technologies there. And I think there's a lot of positive energy around that, and a lot of confidence about the future. But of course, a lot of this has got to be, the tone of that has to be set by government as well, to make sure there's clear plans around supporting the sector to grow into these new areas for the future. I think that's very important. And there is a good dialogue with government, I would say, but we will continually press on them to support what is a great manufacturing sector. I think if you look at last year, we did see a really good response by manufacturers to the pandemic in changing their capacity towards manufacturing ventilators and PPE and test kits now. A really important response, because I think the Prime Minister certainly recognised that you need a resilient manufacturing sector in times of need to be able to turn to. You can't depend solely on overseas sources. And I think that's given everyone quite a boost in terms of the importance of the sector to the country.
Yeah, I think it's within everyone's nature, isn't it? As good as we're doing, as good as the government can be doing, it's in our nature. We always want more. Do you think it would help if there was someone, some people in government with manufacturing in their job title?
Well, there are at the official level. I mean, and we do have one or two people in a very senior position that are familiar. But of course, you can never have enough people that have got experience of the sector and appreciation of it. Well, I spend quite a bit of my time talking to ministers and encouraging them to visit manufacturing sites. And I must say, certainly the Kwasi, the new business secretary,
sure,
is very good at engaging with business. Yeah. It's the only way you're going to get them to really understand the sector, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. But like my previous statement, we always, as manufacturers, we always want more, don't we? Always want more support. But Stephen, many thanks for coming on today. It's been great to learn about yourself, about Make UK, and where you see the industry moving forward. And we appreciate your time.
Look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you very much.
Wow, a fascinating interview there with Stephen.
Absolutely, Joe. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, please email us at podcast@mtdmfg.com. And we are specifically looking for SME manufacturers as well to join the show. We really want to get a good balance between the larger manufacturers and the smaller and family-run companies.
Yep, so get back on with the news. That's what we're here for. Alexander Dennis, Britain's largest bus manufacturer. It's won another huge order.
Yeah, so this is certainly one of the most popular stories over the last couple of weeks, Joe. So, as you say, Alexander Dennis, Falkirk, you're based in Falkirk, Britain's biggest bus manufacturer, which is easy to say. Huge export order for 198 double-deckers from Berlin-based public transport operator BVG. So, these have actually been designed in Britain as well, the first time. So, yeah, the Berlin's iconic yellow buses will be built at Alexander Dennis's factories in the UK, with the Scarborough site leading the final assembly.
It's incredible, Stuart. Every week we seem to be talking about Alexander Dennis, whether it's on this show or just on social media. They're absolutely flying.
No, absolutely. I think we talked about it last time. Alexander Dennis are reshoring the chassis production as well. Historically been made abroad by the partner and imported. So, and we're certainly seeing a space of reshoring, and Alexander Dennis leading the way, as you say.
Yeah, another company, it's never far from the news, is BAE Systems. I know we've got some good stuff to report on that company as well.
Yeah, they've revealed for the first time the contribution that Dreadnought, the replacement programme for the Royal Navy's Vanguard-class submarine, makes to the British economy. And, extraordinary figures. It supports 30,000 jobs across the UK, including 8,000 at BAE. £7.5 billion is set to be spent with more than 1,500 British suppliers. BAE is also investing £1 billion transforming its Barrow site to accommodate the new class of boat. So people may have opinions about Dreadnought and this type of submarine and defence spending in general, but the impact it has and the jobs it supports, it can't be faulted.
No, absolutely. It's the numbers. It's staggering. I can't remember seeing an infrastructure, a program that attracts so much, jobs to the UK. I'm sure there are, but it's absolutely fascinating to learn of all these new jobs. And obviously, the Royal Navy. It's a good opportunity to be joining there as well. So, Britishvolt again been in the news all the time, it seems, at the moment. But I think they've just gone one step further to making this a reality.
Yeah, the Britishvolt has appointed quite some senior people within industry in recent times as well, and it's now actually bought the former Blythe Power Station site in Northumberland, earmarked for its first for its new gigafactory. And again, the numbers are astonishing. £2.6 billion investment, one of the largest industrial investments in the UK. expected to create 3,000 direct jobs and thousands more across the UK supply chain. We talked about this before in terms of the, commitment and requirement for gigafactories across the UK. We know that, we need maybe 3-4 different, areas of the country. And, I think it's a challenge for them to raise the finance. Obviously that's always going to be a difficulty if you're looking to raise £2.5 billion, but certainly moving in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. We've talked about aeroplanes, we've talked about buses, we've talked about a submarine. Now we're going to talk about cars. Rolls-Royce Motor Cars, their highest ever first quarter sales result in 116-year history. Is how many of those did you buy?
I've just got 3, as we talked about last time. I'm more interested in Norton, in the Cheshire Hills, Joe. Between the 1st of January to 31st of March this year, Rolls-Royce delivered 1,380 cars to customers, which is up a massive 62% on the corresponding period last year. Sales growth was seen in all of its key markets, with the strongest in China, the United States, and Asia Pacific. So it's, Bentley, the luxury car manufacturers are doing particularly well. Bentley have come out and, they're on track for a record year as well. And so when we post about Rolls-Royce Motor Cars and Bentley on social media, there is always a little bit of negativity, in terms of, the pandemic's not really affected the wealthy, but, you can't knock what they're doing. And, the vast majority of these cars are being exported.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. If don't get me wrong, we'd all like to increase our wealth, but if the rich are getting richer and they keep buying expensive cars, it keeps middle class people in jobs, I suppose, isn't it?
Absolutely, it filters, right through the supply chain, and I think it should be celebrated. Absolutely, Joe.
Quite. Another one, Siemens Mobility. Some fantastic news there again.
Huge investment from Siemens. So the latest one being in conjunction with the University of Birmingham. They are set to build a new rail innovation centre in Goole. £50 million investment. 250 jobs expected to be created. And this will complement the new £200 million train factory under construction in the Yorkshire town. So again, they talk about I believe it's 700 direct jobs with the new train factory, 250 during the construction phase, well over 1,000, across the UK supply chain. So, we need jobs and we want manufacturing to be right at the vanguard of the post-pandemic future of Britain. And these type of investments and this kind of scale of investment is exactly what's required.
Yeah, and obviously doing it in a cohesive manner with the University of Birmingham. Obviously, we're going to be upskilling people and bringing new people into the industry too.
Absolutely, I think that kind of STEM engagement and educating and encouraging people to consider engineering and manufacturing careers is absolutely critical. And it's kind of, before the pandemic there was a huge skills gap. There is going to be a skills gap as we recover, from the pandemic. So anything that encourages young people to consider a career in this industry, it has to be welcomed. Yeah,
JCB, it gets a bit repetitive, doesn't it, with all these orders? But they just keep doing it week after week after week, it feels like. Another £65 million order for over 2,000 of their machines.
Yeah, as you say, JCB are flying, great start to the year. I mean, since February, the firm's created 850 jobs, won a £26 million order from Ardent Hire. This £65 million order from Sunbelt Rentals, which is the biggest order from a UK customer in the British manufacturer's 75-year history. So it's, as most manufacturers did last year, they had the challenges. They suffered. They were looking at pivoting production and so forth to help with the ventilator challenge. But it's fantastic to see them back, and the construction market is soaring worldwide. So JCB are obviously going to benefit from that, and their employees and all the the supply chain partners as well.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of these orders, actually, obviously they export a lot, but a lot of these orders are for UK businesses, aren't they? So that tells us we must be, I guess, building a lot of factories, building a lot of, residential developments as well.
I think it was a couple of days ago, the construction, similar to the PMI that we've referred to before, the construction figures were really, really strong as well. So as you say, it's certainly making it's a healthy comeback. And, people talk about construction. Well, what's that got to do with manufacturing? Well, it does. You've got people like Ibstock, Brick, and brick manufacturers, and around the UK and the supply chain. So there is a close correlation between construction and manufacturing.
Yeah, and we've talked about Rolls-Royce motor cars. It would hardly be fair not to mention Rolls-Royce, aviation. It started building the world's largest aero engine here in Derby.
Absolutely, and Rolls-Royce motor cars, quite often people get confused on social media. They are separate companies, and Rolls-Royce has started building the world's largest aero engine at its demo work site in Derby. The UltraFan demonstrator engine will be tested at the aerospace giant's new £90 million test bed 80 facility, which is due to open in Derby in the next few months. So good news from Rolls-Royce. We talked about Magellan, so hopefully we talked about Moog. So there's three really strong positive stories in the aerospace sector, which hopefully is an indication of what's to come, for the remainder of this year.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we've run through 11 positive news stories today. We could have probably done 20 or 30. There's been a lot of good news in the last few days. Obviously, we want to keep these podcasts as short as we can. But if you go to our various channels, the Jefferson on theirs, MTDMFG on theirs, you can see all these stories in full. But that's going to bring the end to another episode of the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. I would like to thank our guest, Stephen Phipson, CEO of Make UK, my co-host Stuart Whitehead, but as always, our biggest thanks goes to you at home for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to be a guest on future episodes, please email podcast@mtdmfg.com. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Great British Manufacturing Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and a review. You can find us on Twitter using @MTDMFG and @Jefferson_MFG.